My name is Margie, and I am an adult woman who believed she knew exactly who she was married to. I work out of town regularly, long stretches away that were supposed to be temporary sacrifices for a future we were building together, and I never questioned what waited for me at home because trust had never felt optional. It felt assumed. We had plans, timelines, conversations about moving, about slowing down, about finally taking time just for us once summer ended. Work wrapped up early that week, unexpectedly slow, and I decided to come home a day sooner than planned, imagining surprising my husband, imagining the look on his face when he realized we had an extra night together before our road trip. I didn't text him. I wanted it to be spontaneous. I wanted it to feel romantic. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a car I didn't recognize. It wasn't parked carelessly. It wasn't hidden. It sat there like it belonged, and something in my chest tightened before my mind could catch up. I remembered my neighbor mentioning a new car recently and brushed the thought aside, but the feeling didn't leave. It grew stronger the closer I got to the house. I trusted my husband completely, but that didn't stop my instincts from screaming. I walked around the side of the house, my heart pounding so loudly it felt like it would give me away. Our bedroom window was open. I heard voices, laughter, intimacy that did not belong to me anymore. When I looked inside, everything I believed about my life collapsed in a single second. They were naked in our bed. I didn't scream. I didn't confront them. I walked away because I didn't trust myself to stay. My hands were shaking, my thoughts racing, and all I could think about was how close I was to doing something I could never undo. I drove straight to my family's cabin and drank until my thoughts blurred, fighting urges that scared me more than the betrayal itself. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who I was without the life I thought I had. I only knew this moment mattered more than anything else that had ever happened to me. And whatever I did next would change everything. I woke up the next morning on the cabin couch with my head pounding and my phone face down on the table like it was something dangerous. For a few seconds, I didn't remember why I was there, and that brief ignorance felt almost merciful. Then everything came rushing back. The truck in the driveway, the open window, my bed, and the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears as I walked away from the life I thought I had. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Every time I imagined seeing his face, my chest tightened and my thoughts spiraled into places I didn't trust myself to go. Instead, I stayed where I was and reached out to strangers online, typing out what had happened because saying it out loud to people who knew me felt impossible. I wasn't ready for pity or advice from friends and family. I just needed to get the words out of my head. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people who had lived through their own versions of betrayal, people telling me to slow down, to breathe, to protect myself first. Reading them made me cry in a way I hadn't yet, not because it fixed anything, but because it reminded me I wasn't alone in this kind of pain. For the first time since I looked through that window, the rage dulled just enough for me to think. I started replaying the past few months in my head, scenes I had dismissed at the time suddenly rearranging themselves into something uglier. The late-night texting he brushed off as work. The sudden increase in girls' nights he encouraged me not to question because he wanted me to trust him. The yoga class that never seemed to make him more flexible. The unknown calls that would hang up the moment I answered his phone. None of it had seemed alarming on its own, but together it formed a pattern I didn't want to see until now. My brother came up to the cabin that afternoon after I finally answered his call. He didn't ask questions right away. He just sat with me, listened, let me talk until my voice gave out. He reminded me who I was before all of this, before I let my life revolve so tightly around someone else. Being around him grounded me in a way nothing else had since the discovery. That night, I decided on something small but important. I wasn't going to confront my husband yet. I wasn't ready, and I refused to let anger dictate my next move. When he texted me, asking where I was and why I hadn't come home, I lied. I told him work had sent me to a remote site and I wouldn't be able to call until the weekend was over. He accepted it without hesitation, which somehow hurt more than if he had questioned me. We had planned a romantic getaway for the weekend, something I booked months earlier to reconnect after a long, busy summer. When I told him I was canceling, he suggested taking his ex-girlfriend instead, laughing it off like a harmless alternative. That suggestion landed wrong, but I kept my composure and told him I had already given the reservation to my brother and his wife since it was non-refundable. He didn't argue. He didn't seem suspicious. That confirmed what I already feared. Lying had become normal for him. With that decision made, I felt a strange sense of relief. I bought myself time. Time to think, to prepare, to make sure that when I finally spoke to him, I wouldn't be begging for answers I already knew existed. For now, distance was my protection, and silence was the only thing keeping me steady. The drive to the vineyard should have felt like an escape, but every mile only gave my thoughts more room to run. My brother kept the conversation light at first, talking about work, about nothing in particular, letting me set the pace. Eventually I broke, and once I started talking, it all came out in one long, messy stream, every doubt I had ignored. Every moment I convinced myself I was being paranoid. He didn't interrupt, he just listened, and that alone made the weight in my chest feel a little less suffocating. The bed and breakfast was beautiful in a way that almost felt mocking. It had been meant for intimacy, for reconnecting, for pretending we were still the couple everyone thought we were. Instead, it became a place where I finally let myself grieve what was already gone. My brother adjusted without complaint, switching reservations, turning it into something practical instead of romantic. We fished, drove around, ate too much, and pretended for brief stretches that my life hadn't imploded. While I was trying to breathe again, my sister-in-law was doing something else entirely. She didn't tell me until the weekend was nearly over, sitting across from me with a look on her face that told me whatever she was about to say would hurt. She admitted she had been checking on my house while we were away, and what she saw confirmed everything I had been afraid of. The same truck was there overnight. On Saturday morning, she watched a woman leave, followed her, and found the apartment where she lived. My husband spent the night there. He stayed there while texting me that he missed me, that he loved me, that he couldn't wait for our future. Hearing that didn't make me cry. It made something inside me go numb. She showed me pictures, proof I didn't ask for but needed. I didn't want to see them, but knowing they existed was enough. Whatever part of me was still clinging to doubt let go completely in that moment. This wasn't a mistake, it was a pattern. It was a choice he was making over and over again. That night, after everyone else went to bed, I met with a counselor my sister-in-law had arranged. We walked, talked, and for the first time since everything happened, I said the words out loud without breaking. She didn't push me toward forgiveness or reconciliation. She told me something simpler and harder to hear, that delaying the confrontation would only prolong the pain, and that clarity, no matter how brutal, was necessary. On the drive home the next morning, I rehearsed 100 different versions of the conversation in my head, all of them ending badly. I stopped by the house only long enough to grab the things that mattered most to me: photos, keepsakes, pieces of a life I wasn't ready to lose completely. Then I did something I never imagined I would do. I checked his location. I checked his lies. I confirmed the truth one last time before asking him to face it. When I finally texted him and told him we needed to talk, my hands were steady, even though my heart wasn't. I knew there was no going back after this. Whatever happened next would strip away whatever illusions we had left. And for the first time since I walked away from that window, I was ready to hear the truth, even if it destroyed everything else. When I told him to come home, he asked what was wrong, and I could almost hear the rehearsed innocence in his tone. I didn't explain. I told him to be ready to be honest, and then turned my phone off because I couldn't listen to another lie. 15 minutes later, I heard his car pull into the driveway. He walked in like nothing was wrong, leaning in to hug me, the way he always did, and I stepped back before he could touch me. That small movement changed the entire room. He asked again what was going on. I told him this was his chance to tell the truth. He stared at me, confused or pretending to be, and said he had no idea what I was talking about. I told him if he couldn't be honest, I was leaving. That was when panic finally flickered across his face. He started grasping for explanations, asking if this was about yoga, about stress, about walks he had been taking to clear his head. Each answer felt like a test to see how little he could admit and still keep me there. I pushed him. I asked where he was really going, why he lied so easily, why honesty seemed harder for him than deception. He tried to frame it as protecting me, said he didn't want to add to my stress, said he didn't mean to lie. The excuses stacked up quickly, each one thinner than the last. When I told him I knew there was more, that this couldn't work if he kept hiding things, he deflected again, bringing up a night out with friends I didn't even know about, insisting it must have bothered me. That was the moment something in me snapped into focus. I told him this was his last chance. Either he told me everything or I was done. He froze, went quiet, and then said he had nothing else to say. I stood up, grabbed my things, and walked out. He followed me, stunned when he realized I wasn't just going for a drive this time. My phone lit up with messages as soon as I left, his voice cracking when I finally answered, repeating that he loved me, that he would never hurt me, words that used to calm me and now felt like knives. When I came back later, it was because he asked if I had talked to his friend, the one he suddenly seemed terrified of. That fear told me everything I needed to know. Inside the house, he broke down completely, sobbing on the couch, apologizing without saying what he was sorry for. I asked him to tell me what he did, not how bad he felt. It took minutes that felt like hours before he finally admitted that the truth was worse than he had been saying. He confessed in fragments, stopping to cry, starting again, revealing just enough to see if I would stay. I didn't move. I didn't comfort him. I waited. When he finally said the word affair, when he admitted it wasn't one night or one mistake, but something that had been going on while I was out of town working for us, I felt dizzy, like the floor had tilted under my feet. I asked him to fix it. He looked at me like he didn't understand what that meant. I told him that if he believed honesty was what he owed me, then the other person involved deserved it too. I told him the woman he was seeing had a partner, and that partner deserved the same truth he had denied me. Watching him realize what I was asking was almost surreal. He hesitated, begged, tried to protect someone who hadn't protected our marriage, and that hesitation told me just how deep the betrayal went. By the time the phone calls were made and the truth spilled into another household, the fallout was immediate and brutal. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt empty, sitting in the wreckage of two marriages collapsing at once, knowing there was no version of this where everyone walked away intact. When the calls stopped and the silence returned, I knew there was nothing left to say. Whatever future we had imagined ended the moment honesty became optional. All that remained now was deciding how to live with what had been revealed, and whether walking away was an act of destruction or the first step towards survival. After the last call ended, the house felt hollow, like all the air had been sucked out of it at once. My husband sat on the edge of the couch, hands covering his face, rocking slightly, as if that motion could undo what had just happened. I stood a few feet away, arms crossed, not to appear strong, but to keep myself from shaking apart. He kept saying my name, over and over, as if repetition could soften the reality between us. He promised everything at once: counseling, transparency, quitting his job if that's what it took, never traveling without me again, never being alone again if that made me feel safer. He said he would spend the rest of his life making it up to me, that this affair didn't mean anything, that it was a distraction, a stupid escape, a mistake fueled by stress and distance. Every word sounded rehearsed, like lines pulled from a script he hoped would still work. I asked him why he kept lying even when I gave him space to tell the truth. He didn't answer that directly. He said he was scared. He said he didn't want to lose me. He said he thought he could stop before it got worse. Hearing that hurt more than the affair itself, because it meant there were countless moments where he chose himself over us and still believed he was protecting me. His phone buzzed again. Messages from friends, from family, from people who suddenly knew pieces of our private disaster and felt entitled to weigh in. Some begged me to show compassion. Some warned me not to act out of anger. One message from his father stood out, simple and devastating, telling me that whatever I chose, I needed to choose myself first. That was the moment I finally cried. Deep, body-shaking sobs that felt like they had been waiting for permission. I recognized the danger in those words, not just for him, but for me. I refused to become responsible for his survival on top of everything else. I called his closest friend and told her exactly what was happening, told her to come keep an eye on him, and when she arrived, I packed a bag and left. I didn't look back when I walked out. I drove until the streets blurred together, until the adrenaline faded and exhaustion settled in its place. I spent the night in a spare room offered by someone who didn't ask questions, someone who understood that sometimes the kindest thing is silence. By morning, my phone was full again. Messages from his family. Messages from the woman he cheated with. Alternating between apologies and accusations. Messages from people telling me I was cruel for exposing the truth. None of them asked how I was. I met with my counselor later that day and a lawyer the next morning. Sitting in those offices made everything feel real in a way nothing else had. This wasn't just emotional devastation. It was paperwork, timelines, decisions that couldn't be undone. I realized that even if I wanted to go back, There was no version of us that existed without this shadow now. I don't know exactly how this will end. I don't know what my life looks like without the person I planned it around. What I do know is that staying would mean accepting a version of love built on deception, and leaving, no matter how painful, gives me a chance at something honest again. Right now, that has to be enough. The days after I left blurred together in a way that made time feel unreliable. I moved through my hours on autopilot, answering emails, sitting through meetings, eating meals I couldn't taste, all while my phone buzzed endlessly with other people's opinions about a life they didn't have to live. Everyone seemed to have a theory about what I should do next, as if there were a correct sequence for surviving betrayal, but none of them were the ones waking up in the middle of the night, reaching for someone who no longer felt real. I stayed away from the house. I couldn't stand the idea of breathing the same air where everything had unraveled. Instead, I focused on logistics because emotions were too volatile to touch directly. I met with my lawyer, handed over documents, answered questions about finances and timelines, and felt strangely detached as we talked about separation like it was a business transaction. It was easier to discuss assets than feelings. Assets didn't look back at me with regret in their eyes. My husband kept trying to reach me through other people when I stopped responding directly. His friends told me he was destroyed, that he wasn't eating, that he barely slept, that he talked about me like I was already gone. His mother asked me to remember the man he used to be. His sister said everyone makes mistakes and that forgiveness is what marriage is built on. Each message felt like a reminder that I was expected to be strong enough to absorb everyone else's discomfort so they wouldn't have to sit with it. What no one seemed to understand was that I wasn't punishing him. I was protecting myself. In quieter moments, when the anger faded, grief rushed in to fill the space. I mourned the future I thought we were moving toward, the kids we planned to have, the house closer to his job we were supposed to move into. I grieved the version of myself who trusted without hesitation, who believed loyalty was mutual because it always had been before. That version of me didn't die in a dramatic moment. She faded slowly, realization by realization, until I could finally admit she wasn't coming back. I met with Sharon again, walking the same streets as before, talking through things I didn't want to admit out loud. She asked me what staying would cost me, not emotionally, but personally. What parts of myself would I have to silence to make it work? The answer came faster than I expected. I would have to doubt my instincts forever. I would have to monitor instead of trust. I would have to accept that honesty only came when forced. Saying that out loud made the decision feel less like a loss and more like a boundary. One evening, I finally answered a call from my husband. He didn't beg this time. He sounded empty, resigned. He asked if I thought there was any chance left at all. I told him the truth, the last one I had left to give. I said that even if I loved him, love couldn't survive without safety, and I didn't feel safe with him anymore. There was a long pause before he said he understood, and I knew he didn't, not fully, but he heard enough to stop asking. When I hung up, I expected to feel shattered. Instead, I felt quiet. I don't know what my life looks like from here. I don't know how long it will take before the anger fades completely or before the grief softens into something manageable. What I do know is that I didn't destroy my marriage by telling the truth. It was destroyed the moment honesty stopped being a given. All I did was refuse to keep living inside a lie that wasn't mine to carry. For now, that has to be enough. I didn't announce my decision to anyone. I just lived it. Weeks passed, then months, and the noise around my divorce slowly dulled into a distant hum. People stopped checking in as frequently. The crisis phase ended, and what remained was the quieter, lonelier work of rebuilding a life that no longer revolved around managing someone else's choices. I moved into a small place closer to work, not because it was part of some grand reinvention, but because it made sense. Practical decisions became my anchor when emotions felt unreliable. I learned what peace actually feels like. Not happiness in the movie sense, not closure wrapped in a neat bow, but the absence of constant vigilance. I stopped checking my phone compulsively. I stopped wondering where someone was, who they were with, or what version of the truth I was being fed. That alone felt like a kind of freedom I hadn't realized I was missing until it was mine again. My ex reached out a few times in the early months, never angry, never accusatory, always measured and sad. He told me he was in therapy, that he finally understood how much damage he'd caused, that he would spend the rest of his life regretting it. I believed him, and that surprised me. Believing him didn't mean I wanted him back. It just meant I could acknowledge his pain without taking responsibility for it. That distinction took time to learn. There were nights when I missed him. Not the man he became at the end, but the one I thought I married. I missed inside jokes, shared routines, the comfort of familiarity. On those nights, I let myself feel it without rewriting history. Missing someone doesn't mean they are safe to return to. Loving someone doesn't obligate you to sacrifice yourself for their redemption. The first time I caught myself laughing without restraint, it startled me. It happened during an ordinary dinner with friends, mid-conversation, no warning. I realized afterward that I hadn't thought about him all evening. That was when I understood healing isn't dramatic. It's quiet, incremental, and often invisible until you look back and notice how far you've come. I don't tell my story to scare people or to prove resilience. I tell it because betrayal thrives in silence, and clarity only comes when you're willing to face what hurts without flinching. I didn't ruin my marriage. I didn't destroy anyone's life by refusing to lie. I chose honesty when dishonesty had already done its damage. This isn't the life I planned, but it's the one where I can breathe, where my instincts are no longer my enemy, where love, if it finds me again, will have to meet me, where trust is mutual and truth is non-negotiable. And that, finally, feels like a future worth stepping into.